Bookseller Crow, almost live.
On the hill. Yes. My name is Karen McLeod. I organise the events here, and I'm also writer in residence. And I'd like to welcome you on this very rainy night, and well done for making it. So tonight I also bought a very small journalist's pad, which I hope you're admiring, just to join in with the ladies here. So I'm just going to introduce our guests, and then they're going to take it away. So Sofia Money-Coutts is a journalist and author who spent 5 years studying the British aristocracy while working as... Yes, I know! You've got a degree and a foundation course.
PhD.
Essentially. While working as features director at Tatler. Prior to this, you were editor at Evening Standard and the Daily Mail, and you often appear on radio and TV talking about very important topics such as Prince Harry's wedding and the etiquette of the threesome.
Yep.
Which I shall be quizzing you about later, because I think I've done it wrong up until now. Anyway, The Wish List is your third novel, so welcome.
Thank you.
And Gavanndra Hodge worked in you've worked in newspapers and magazines for over 20 years. In 2018, you left Tatler and became a freelance writer. And you contribute to publications at Sunday Times, The Times, Telegraph, and this is your first book, a wonderful memoir which has been a brilliant hit, and you were actually our first guest when during lockdown you came and talked to Jonathan when we ran our first series of sort of talks from an empty bookshop, and it's still the most watched.
Is it?
YouTube film to this date, I think. Is that right, Jonathan?
Just about.
Oh, right, okay.
I've got some competition.
Clearly I didn't run the stats. Anyway.
Well, let's stick with that for the time.
Yeah. So please put your hands together for Gavanndra and Sophia. Talking about their products.
Thank you, Karen.
You're welcome.
So we're just going to introduce our books and do little readings, and then we're going to interview each other using our incisive journalistic skills. Very sadly, our friend Matthew was meant to be here tonight to chair. But it's not that we're relieved. It might have been quite scary to have Matthew here.
Well, he's a proper BBC.
He's very serious. So it will be a slightly kind of less serious event as a result. But we will try and sort of channel his intellectual rigour a little bit, not all of it.
Not sure about my questions.
No.
You might.
So I'll go first.
Yep.
Describing my book. So my book is a memoir, and I think most people here know quite a lot about it. It's a memoir about my childhood and my sister Candy's death, and my father, who was a heroin addict and a drug dealer and a hairdresser and a philanderer and a general sort of naughty human, but also rather fabulous. And it's about my relationship with him and my attempts to re-find my sister, who through a sort of tempestuous teens I forgot about after she died. So it's about trying to retrieve her memory, essentially. So that's my book. And Soph's book.
This is what I'm nervous about following. My book is a rom-com, a novel, and it stars my heroine Florence, who has never had a boyfriend and is a bit ashamed and embarrassed of this because her family is much more glamorous than she is. She lives with her two very glamorous half-sisters, Mia and Ruby, and we meet them all at the beginning of the novel, and they're all having a family dinner to celebrate one of the half-sisters' engagements. And the very bossy stepmother Patricia says to poor Florence, who's never had a boyfriend, "Darling, it's so embarrassing that you've never had a boyfriend. You're going to go and see this love coach that I read about in Posh magazine." And so she goes to see this love coach that she read about in Posh magazine called Gwendolyn, and Gwendolyn makes Florence write a list of all the attributes she's looking for in a man. sort of not really taking it very seriously, and then
One of them doesn't use
Dun!
umbrellas.
One of them what?
Doesn't use umbrellas.
Oh yes, she doesn't like men who use umbrellas. Yes, that's one of the things on her
On
list.
a day like today.
It's slightly personal, that one, because
Yeah.
I'm not keen on umbrellas, so we'll get on to the sort of autobiographical. So she writes this mad list of things that she's looking for in a man, not taking it very seriously, and then who should come into a bookshop one day but someone who seems to fit all these mad qualities. So, yes, mine is for the lols. Gav, maybe fewer lols, but although we'll get on to the fact that there are
synchronicities.
Yeah, in the Venn diagram
Yes,
of our
we have
books.
found places where they kind of the themes braid together
You're
in
trying
a
to find
very satisfying way. But
No
we'll get
overlap.
on to that. So we're just going to do short readings now, and then we'll interview each other, and then we will do some more readings, just so you know. And then you can ask questions, because I'm sure.
Yes.
Okay. I was making my own breakfast by the time I was 3, climbing onto the kitchen worktop to pull down packets of cereal, going into the living room to eat fistfuls of Rice Krispies out of the box in front of the television, the screen too close to my nose, the room dark, wine bottles and ashtrays all around, my parents still asleep, who knew when they would wake up. My mother once told me that she and Dad were surprised to find themselves pregnant a second time because they had been so wasted on booze and drugs that they couldn't remember having had sex. I would have been nearly 4 years old when they conceived my sister. If they couldn't remember having sex, who was looking after me? I don't ask this question. I don't want to upset her. They had met late one night on the embankment. Mum had been to a ball. She was a model, so she was probably paid to go, paid to look gorgeous. Sometimes she was paid to pretend to be the girlfriend of a person she barely knew, a European actor or film director who needed a woman on his arm for an event. But on this night, she'd had enough of pretending. She was standing on the street waiting for a cab that never arrived, her toes numb in her high heels, her lacquered curls wilting. And along came Dad, driving his psychedelic camper van, the Rolling Stones blaring from the stereo, his long hair dyed orange by henna and the Spanish sun. He was just back from 3 years in Marbella, and the first person he saw in London was Mum, a gorgeous blonde in distress. He pulled over, the cars around him beeping in protest, and wound down the window. Hop in, love. I'll take you where you want to go. I was conceived not long afterwards. It was a hot King's Road afternoon, perfect for lovemaking by an open window. A round of applause at the end from the art school students who had gathered to watch in the halls of residence opposite. The doctors told my parents they were having a boy. They were going to call me Gavin Jr. But when I was born a girl, my dad made up Gavanndra, insisting on the 2 N's, even though the man at the register office told him he was spelling the name wrong. My mum chose my middle name, Layla, after her favourite song by Derek and the Dominoes. My parents married 2 months after I was born. It was Mum's birthday. Dad had forgotten to buy her a present, so asked her to marry him instead. This was how my family began, chance and brazen caprice. Instability that has to become solid at some point, doesn't it? Because otherwise there is nothing to build on, nothing that a child can be certain of. I was that child. My memories of my father's dealer days are not narrative, they are sensory. The toothache sweetness of Alpen and butterscotch Angel Delight mixture that was the only food he, a junkie, could eat. The dusty smell of the incense, the rough scratch of the kilim cushion material. I must have been a little high myself, dopey with heroin smoke, my hazy memories not so different to the fragmentary recollections of the other people there, the ones who lost a whole decade, often a whole life to drugs. But I know it happened. I know I sat in the living room with those people night after night, watching them chase the dragon, snort coke, smoke joints, cleaning up after them, managing their chaos in my small, determined way. The story starts to knit together as I get a bit older, when I better understood what my father and his friends did every night. It was not what other people's parents did. I discovered once I started staying the night with friends and would creep around dark houses in which everyone was asleep by 11 p.m. I would get scared, wake up the parents, tell them I wanted to go home. It was dangerous too, I discovered, the day a rival dealer tried to break into our flat, banging his fists against the door, kicking at it until the wood splintered. Dad pushed himself against the door, shouting, "Fuck off, fuck off." Eventually, the man gave up and left. Emotional intensity helps to set memory, and fear is the most intense emotion of all because we have the most to learn from it.
Someone's going to dive in a scene when they're trying on wedding dresses.
It's like light and shade, isn't it? We're just giving all of human life.
So this is when Mia, the half sister's having her first wedding dress fitting with Florence, my heroine, and Patricia, the very bossy stepmother. While Hilda helped Mia into something that looked more like a marquee than a dress, Patricia's attention shifted. Florence, darling, how was your session with Gwendolyn? Was it helpful? I held my breath, debating how much to share. It was fine, I replied carefully. Shit, the love coach, said Ruby, dropping her phone in her lap. Sorry, Flo, I forgot to ask. What did she say? My stepmother went on. You guys ever heard of patient confidentiality? Oh, come on, darling, it's only us and Hilda, and we won't tell anybody, will we? Hilda, unsure what she was agreeing to, shook her head at Patricia. She made me write a list, I said resignedly. What kind of list? Asked Mia from the cubicle. I leant my head against the back of the sofa, eyes closed. A list of whatever I'm looking for in a man. Must be tall and have all his own hair, that sort of thing. What was on your list? Asked Patricia. I've read about this online, piped up Hilda. It's like a sort of wish list. For God's sake, I muttered, opening my eyes. Yes, it's like a wish list. You write a list of traits. Mine included likes reading, is adventurous, has an interesting job and is into cats. And then you put it out to the universe, and supposedly the universe will deliver him. Sounds mad, said Mia. Agreed, said Ruby. Where did you find this woman again, Mum? In Posh magazine. She's very well respected, said Patricia. When's your next session, Florence? I think you need to take it more seriously. What have cats got to do with anything? I placed my palms on my knees for strength. In a couple of weeks, unfortunately. You said I only had to go to one session, and then I find out you've booked a package of them. I'd rather enter a convent than go back to that room. You might have to enter a convent at this rate. Actually, I've got a date tomorrow. I hadn't meant to let it slip out, but I wanted to silence her. Needless to say, she was the first to reply. Darling, how exciting. With who? Said Mia. So it's worked, added Ruby. I shook my head. It's nothing to do with the list. He came into the shop and we chatted, not for very long, but then he asked me for a coffee. So I'm meeting him tomorrow. What time tomorrow? Can I do your makeup? Said Mia. Afternoon, and yes, but can you not make me look mad? Nothing too over the top. You know I don't wear much makeup. Oh, Flo, stop fussing. A bit of eyeshadow never killed anyone. Who is he, though, darling? Persisted Patricia. Do you know anything about him? Is he safe? I can't tell you anything else, I said, shrugging. Only that he's called Rory and he likes books. Rory. What an excellent name. So there we have it, and I'm going to kick off by asking you the questions, and then the tables will be turned. So as we have briefly mentioned, yes, Gav's book is, you know, sort of more serious, there's incredibly intense, sort of painful memories throughout. But there is this weird overlap of a sense of humour, and I know you and your wonderful sense of humour, and it's sort of surprising in a way. Well, I know you have that sense of humour, but for others it might be surprising to find these moments in the book of sort of levity when it's a very intense, sad, tragic story in many ways. But there are moments, you know, there's a bit, I remember reading this the first time, when the police are coming to find heroin in your dad's flat, and you have to help, how old are you then?
Probably about 7 or 8.
And you have to help him hide it,
And we hide it
in
in
a torch. And you, in the book, refer to his Mary Poppins bag. And there are other bits of sort of lightness where there's Dizzy, the rabbit, who your mum thinks is Candy reincarnated, your sister reincarnated. And then Dizzy the rabbit gets too big and violent. And it has to be...
In fact, I'm going to read about Dizzy.
Oh, God, sorry, I'm
No, it's fine. It's fine to tee Dizzy up.
But there are these very funny moments. And I just wonder, you know, did you deliberately try and inject those into the book? Or was it just, in many ways, a very sort of darkly comic situation?
I think it genuinely was. I think, you know, my dad was very funny and misbehaved, but always made it fun. Like, the most important thing to Dad was not to be boring, was always to be fun. So, you know, it didn't matter if I sort of did well in my Latin GCSEs. If I was being boring, then that was much, much worse than me sort of failing an exam or sort of bunking off school. Make it fun, make it funny, make the story funny, engage people. You know, he was a hairdresser, and so in many ways he's a performer. And so my childhood was infused with humour, even through all the darkness. And actually my mum and dad, one of the reasons that they sort of fell for each other is they both had a sort of slightly kind of left field sort of sense of humour. So my childhood was funny and mad.
Despite everything.
Despite everything. You know,
the heroin.
You know, Dad, despite the heroin, despite the death, despite the trauma, you know, Dad managed to make things into a joke. And I don't know if that's a coping mechanism or his natural sort of self or a combination of the two.
Yeah.
But it's impossible to write about my childhood without having that part of it, because that's just what my childhood was. I mean, that's as much part of it as everything else. You know, it was sort of crazy, scary, but always fun and mad. And he sort of, I have that in me of him, I think. So that's why it kind of infuses the book. But then also I think inevitably and that's part of, it's like a psychological sort of safety net, isn't it? If we're writing about something really stressful and upsetting, we'll put in a joke, just like we don't want to upset people too much.
It's a very English thing to do,
yeah,
I think.
it's sort of like, oh no, don't worry, I'll make you laugh now. You know, it's okay. Yeah. And I think we do that because just to sort of, we can't always all be sad, and we can't go too deep and linger in it.
No.
Or it's not my nature.
That's sort of quite Scandinavian.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, we're not Ingmar Bergman. We're more like Benny Hill. So it's like we can't. No, that's me being quite Matty Sweet. That was him.
Yeah, there we go.
And we can't sort of linger in those moments without sort of making a silly joke to kind of make it okay. So I think that's part of it too.
No, I think that's very true, and it is very English. And as you said, it's like a coping mechanism. Yeah. Have you ever been told that you developed because I know you know in real life you've got the best sense of humour, or have you just always maybe just inherited it from your dad?
I think I mean, who knows where we get these things from? But I mean, I think finding humour in life is definitely a strategy, because life does throw a lot of. I'm very aware my daughter's in the audience, so don't want to swear too much when I'm not reading from the book. Like, life does throw a lot of bad things at one.
Yeah.
And the only thing and the only thing you can really do is sort of, you know,
laugh,
make a joke about
find the lulls,
because otherwise what are you going to do?
Yeah,
be
particularly
depressed.
at the moment, I guess, right? In the past 18 months.
I'm very impressed by soft little cards. So now I think we talked about this a bit before, and did find some synchronicities. And what I thought, you know, Soft's book is really funny, and it's a kind of classic rom-com. You know, I'm not giving anything away to suggest it's a girl with two romantic options, and to start off with, you know, is she with the right one? Yeah. But by the same token, there's a kind of undercurrent of, it's also a story about grief and anxiety and OCD. So it seems to be, it has kind of more serious kind of underpinnings, and there is definitely kind of gravity with it. And was that always your intention? And how do you balance sort of a rom-com, jokes, lightness with having that element?
How about sort of sex gags with
exactly
grief and darkness? I think the thing is about writing rom-coms, or at least with my rom-coms, is that I always want to have a little bit of substance. You know, it's always going to be a boy meets girl or girl meets two boys scenario. But I think if you just had that, it's a bit unchallenging for me and also for readers. So my first book, available here if anyone wants to buy it afterwards. I mean, not massive plot spoiler, but there's a mother cancer storyline. My second book, there's a sort of accidental pregnancy storyline. This is the third book where there's grief because Florence's mother isn't around and she has OCD. I really thought I was going to get cancelled actually when the hardback came out and someone on Twitter went, you can't just cure OCD with a boyfriend or something, because the ending she's sort of better. I was thinking, oh god, I'm going to get in such trouble. I did actually research it.
You can cure OCD.
Turns out you can.
It's an actual proven
So what does she know? On Goodreads. Idiot. So anyway, so basically I want, you know, the lulz, but also some slightly more serious stuff because otherwise I think there's, you need
doesn't reflect
substance,
reality.
basically. Yeah, exactly.
Like
We
my
have that.
reality had laughs, even
Yeah.
though it was sad. Your reality has
Exactly.
laughs, but also
It's
tears.
what's that quote about letting the light in or something? It's a bit of a cliche. Anyway, that basically.
and also, I mean, there is a fairy tale element to it, so it's about wishes being granted.
Yes.
And also, you do have this very sort of. And at the beginning, it seemed very straightforward. Like there's an evil stepmother and two nasty sisters.
Mhm.
So there's kind of Cinderella
Yeah.
kind of vibes,
Parallels.
which I was kind of looking, like such bitches. But then they become like by the end, actually, they are really lovely and they all love each other and kind of sort of knock along well, and they all need each other. And then I asked you about that, and you said you can't write mean characters.
Yes, I sat down to write this third book, and I was quite excited about sort of two mean characters, because I thought the stepmom was going to be an evil sort of stepmom, not to use that old trope, but also to use that old trope. And one of the love interests was going to be sort of evil, and I found it really hard writing
Pure
good
evil
characters, funny. Good it's writing baddies. I found a lot harder than I thought I would. I don't know what that says about
Is that
me.
about you as a person, about what you believe the universe to be? Like you don't believe people
Really
are all
naive.
You don't believe people are bad.
Maybe, but I don't think I've come across some bad people in my time. Been out with most of them. I just think, again, I suppose, I've always remembered there was a message that I got from a woman, I think it was either after this or after my second book came out, and she sent me a message on Instagram, I think, saying she was a mum of 3 and she hadn't read for years, and she'd picked up a copy of my book in Asda, sorry Jonathan, and also available in bookshops, and it had got her back into reading, and she'd fallen into bed and laughed for the first time in ages. And I just think I can write sort of semi-bad characters, but I think then I quite want to have some nice, it can't be too evil, I think, in my world, because I love the idea that
because pure evil isn't that funny.
Well, I suppose maybe it can be, but I'd rather have, I just think I always want people to fall into bed and laugh with my books, particularly at the moment.
Yeah.
And whenever I get a message from someone saying that has happened, that's the best thing.
Yeah. That's
and so I can write sort of comedy baddies, but not actual baddies, maybe.
And that's it from us. I don't know if you have any questions. Anything you want to know about writing more? Oh, Andrew.
I've got a question.
Okay.
It's to both of you, actually.
Okay.
So I think with the consequences of love, it went through many different forms, didn't it?
Yes.
Some of them fictional. Why did you decide to write this book as memoir rather than fiction? And then also to you, whether you'd consider writing memoir? So to both of you.
I tried writing it as fiction and it didn't work, so I gave up. And then I just thought it's not going to work.
It's a short answer.
Yeah, basically I tried. I thought I'm going to write a book.
Andrew.
I'm going to write a book like Edward St Albin. It's going to be amazing. And I tried, and it just didn't. It never quite worked. So, and I was doing it, and then I left Tatler, and I finally had some mental space because it was so hard to write and edit and do all that stuff. And I just finally had some clarity, and I was like, fuck it, I'm going to write it as a memoir. So I went through and I stripped out all the fiction and just started again, really, and did it as memoir because it felt, trying to do it as fiction, it just got further and further away from what I'd wanted to write, which was about my childhood and about my dad. And I had found in fictionalising it, I was unable to write that story because it's really hard turning a life into a fictional story because it doesn't fit the kind of fiction, it doesn't fit the rules of fictional life. So I gave up, and I just realised it wasn't the right thing to do with the material that I had, and to tell the story I wanted to tell, I couldn't do it. So it worked much better as memoir. So that's why. And you, do you want to write a memoir?
I weirdly, there was talk last year. I did egg freezing. I wrote lots about going through egg freezing, and there was actually talk of me doing a book about that and sort of women in their 30s and fertility and egg freezing and all of that. And then it didn't happen. Actually, I'm quite glad it didn't now, because I sort of did a lot of writing about it, made a podcast about it, and then it's so personal, sort of telling the whole word about my ovaries. I was like, actually, do you know what? I think that's enough.
womb.
I think that's enough. Yeah, I don't think we need a whole book on them as well. So I haven't. And no, I quite like the fact that fiction, you can sort of steal things and borrow them and dress them up. I think with you, the story was so strong.
Yeah, like
in
the
real
minute
life,
I started to try,
why would you? It would almost be unbelievable if you
and
said
I
it was
think
fiction.
It was always a part of me that kind of, like, I remember, this is a really weird memory, but I used to do live fantasy role
I'm
playing.
so intrigued about what this is going to be, knowing you.
I used to
What is
live-
your weird
No,
memory?
don't look at me like that. I used to go to Chislehurst Caves and
Bonus
like
chapter
dress up
for the-
as an elf and fight people
By
with
yourself?
cudgel sticks. No, there were other
Really
people
shocking,
there.
all the people who were
No,
visiting
it was a
Chislehurst
thing that
Cave.
you did. You go to Chislehurst
Oh, I
Caves.
see.
It's Dungeons and Dragons, but in real life.
Okay.
And
Like historical reenactment.
but I would be an elf,
No.
and I would like go through these caves and like bash people with cudgel sticks. It was really fun. I loved it. I used to go a lot. And they said, oh, "What's your name?" My name was Grey Zaka. And I remember someone said to me, "Why don't you just use your own name? It's much cooler."
It's true. Gavanndra
And
Hodge.
so it's like I was always trying to like make stuff up. I don't know why, to sort of put a layer. Maybe because it was too. It wasn't that using my name in live fantasy roleplay was too painful and close. But I mean, just
But it just gives you a bit of distance.
yeah, just giving me some distance and some space. I think.
Yeah.
So that was perhaps why I always
Yeah.
thought that memoir would not be the right. But then I just thought no, memoir is the right way to do it.
Very good.
Are you going to write a memoir, Andrew? Andrew's a writer as well.
Not at the moment. I like to confine my imagination to different
Serial
realms,
killers,
fictional
yeah.
realms.
Yeah. Any other questions? Or just
Can't top
next
that.
time?
Yeah, exactly.
Thank you very much.
They can find you a book for your girlfriend, your husband, your girl or your boy. And if you've got a need for an uplifting read, Justine and Jonathan can pick out a book you'll enjoy. What a book at the Bookseller Crow on the hill. What a book at the Bookseller Crow on the hill. Crystal Palace Hill it is. But you can order online.